to a key story now and a massive pivot by Germany. That country looking to unlock hundreds of billions of euros for defence and infrastructure investments in a dramatic shift, which has seen European bonds plunge, the euro surge, equity markets of Germany jumping 3%. It comes after the US paused military support for Ukraine and the EU put forward a package worth up to 800 billion euros to help countries increase defence spending. Joining us now is someone incredibly well placed to talk about the impacts of this. Oliver Doerre, CEO of Hensoldt. It is a defence company that makes radars, amongst other technology. The Chancellor in waiting of Germany, Friedrich Merz, saying whatever it takes is the mantra. Olivia, thank you for joining us. When do you expect to see this money deployed? How much and how significant will it be for the defence space of Germany? What will it mean for new orders for you in the business going forward?
Well, thanks for having me, Tom. And indeed, it's a true paradigm shift. I think first time in history since decade, we're turning from a design to budget principle to really a design to capability principle. I mean, we have always believed that this would come in. So looking at the orders, I mean, if I compare it to the last extraordinary budget, it took probably about a year till those orders came floating in. And I think we have to take that time because first, the parliament has to approve the principle that has been introduced yesterday evening. Second, as it's designed to capability, those capability documents have to be built up. I mean, for conventional, like the Eurofighter, the 20 additional Eurofighter and other framework contracts, that can come very quickly. But what I also understand that this will be a lot about new smart armament, new innovative products, where I think we need a dialogue with industry, how that come in. That would be then the second step of those orders.
Okay, how quickly do you think it will flow through then? I mean, looking to China, for example, which is also, hosting a major political meeting, they have a deadline of 2027 for a modern military in China, 2049 for it to be among the world's best. One suspects that they're targeting to be the best military in the world. What about Germany? How quickly? How soon?
Well, I think, first of all, we have to note we're not starting from scratch. I mean, looking at the 100 billion extraordinary budget that hasn't been in place since almost 3 years now. So we are producing according to this budget. I think also looking at Hensoldt, we took the responsibility also in anticipation of additional budgets. With 1 billion, we built a new plant for the weapon sites, Optronics in Oberkochen. We have put in place a new logistics center to boost up the supply chain. And from all these past investments, we still have 50% of capacity, headroom, headspace, so that we can deliver quite quickly. And I mean, also Germany has a 27, 29 deadline in their minds. I mean, looking at Russia and the reconstitution after potential ceasefire in Ukraine. And in that regards, again, I mean, we have done something already. There are quick steps to vamp up. And then, of course, the more important thing is that we have a long-term planning security now.
What is the biggest challenge to that ramp up if it's not funding at this point?
Well, it's manifold, and I'm really happy that we had a lot of discussion with the outgoing government, which is pretty much in consensus with the new government coming in. Also, I recently traveled to Brussels. We're talking to the new Commissioner of European defense industry. And I think key topics are bureaucracy. I mean, budget, as you said, is the initial prerequisite. But then we're talking bureaucracy. I mean, we definitely have to ease the business for defense players. Looking at qualification and a couple of legislative acts that are out there. Access to raw material, talking broader for industry, for Hensoldt, as we have a very deep coverage of our supply chain, that is not the critical path. And last but not least, it's about personnel. I mean, here we're taking advantage of a struggling automotive industry in Germany. But if we want to be innovative, I mean, looking at AI, we will need a total different set of engineers as we walk forward.
Yes, I was reading about the people that you've hired from that sector into your business. In terms of rearmament in Europe and independence, how much do you think there is going to be an emphasis on technology that is independent from the United States in terms of the weapons build-out?
Well, of course, I assume that this will be an evolution, not a revolution. It will be a transformative path over the next years. I mean, first of all, it's about conventional capabilities. Air defense is at the very top of the agenda here. Hensoldt, with our battle-proven radar, can play a significant role. I think also what we see from Ukraine is electromagnetic warfare. We haven't taken care a lot of that in the past decade, so that is vamping up. So, for example, with our Pegasus signal intelligence aircraft, that's a similar capability where we today depend on the US. So that's about, we had the first flight last year, that's about to come in, and we would be ready once the aircraft is ready to produce more. And of course, looking at the vehicles. But for the innovative capabilities, I think it's about ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, where we today still have a strong dependency. Here it's about networking European capabilities and having effective software algorithms that bring the data together to have information superiority, decision superiority, and in the end also effectors superiority. And space is a topic. I mean, we're discussing as Hensoldt to bring some of our sensors into the space. We see great opportunities with new constellations. And last but not least, a challenge for us is addressing the UAV. So far we have been rather on the path of larger UAVs, helicopters, aircraft, but now we see those smaller UAVs. So here we are about to initiate partnerships with UAV vendors to look at new payloads that we bring in that have to, of course, also be smart and connectable.
Yeah, and when we talk UAVs, we're talking unmanned aerial vehicles or drones, effectively, aren't we? Oliver, the UK and the US have a uniquely close military partnership. Does that make the UK uniquely exposed in terms of our over-reliance on the US?
Well, I think definitely, I mean, looking at Europe now, because I think important in the current discussion, as we see an evolutionary path going forward, we should not turn our back on the US, but I think the view is really to take responsibility for defense in Europe. And here, as we saw Minister President Starmer inviting the Europeans, I would see that the German-French engine has to really be revived. Around that, we have the Weimar Triangle with Poland. And we see that now UK and probably the Baltics and also the Nordic countries are entering the game. Recently visiting the Munich Security Conference, we could see that there's still a kind of divide between the NATO and EU members, where some of them are feeling the breath of Putin in the sense of a true threat, and others are rather reluctant. So I think it depends on a coalition of the willing, where the UK is, at least to my perception at the moment, a strong player.
A strong player. Okay, interesting. What if there is a truce in Ukraine with Russia? What if that war is somehow resolved? Does all of this defence spending fade? The rush that we've seen in this week, the sudden kind of realisation and huge ramp up in spending, does that falter if there is a truce?
Well, yes. I mean, if we look into the past, I share that concern, because we had a lot of volatility in the past 3 years after the Zeitenwende, which you could also see at the volatility of our stock price going up and down whenever there were news about a ceasefire in Ukraine. To make it very clear, from a business perspective, we depend on a very low one-digit percentage on the Ukraine business, despite that this is a top priority for us to stand with Ukraine. But business-wise, I mean, if there would be a ceasefire, it doesn't have a great impact. On the other hand, I definitely see, and that also reflects the discussions I had in Brussels and Berlin, everybody's well aware that a ceasefire in Ukraine, looking at the broader threat from Russia, is really increasing that threat, because Russia would use this time for reconstitution, and with now US drawing back, I think they will dare, as we see 2029, to test the Article 5 of NATO. And in that regards, I can only strongly recommend to sustain that activity. But what we see with the rearm plan from Ursula von der Leyen, and also what Friedrich Merz and his potential coalition partners have introduced yesterday evening, that is aiming at a long-term, I would say, 1 decade spending of rearming Europe, or to say it with the words of Trump, Europe and Germany are back.
Yeah, well, that's a nice line to end it on, but I don't want to end it on that. One quick one before you go, Oliver. The interoperability challenge of European defence. The US has one main battle tank. Europe has more than a dozen battle tanks. It's a fragmented space. Are you willing to play your role in terms of consolidation? How willing are policymakers across the EU to push through for a more coordinated defence industry?
No, I think definitely we have to work on both sides. I mean, that's a discussion I had with also the defense commissioner and what I see in these defense papers. The white paper is about to release on EU level. The fading German government has released a paper. So this is about harmonizing capabilities. And I think here we need a strong political impetus to really force the nations based on budget incentives and so on to harmonize. On the other hand, industry has to take responsibility. And again, whenever we talk consolidation, we're very quickly in this mood that the big players go together and so on. I'd rather drive it from partnership. For me, consolidation is a means to an end. You saw that Hensoldt has recently announced cooperations with Lockheed Martin, with Saab. So we're working on a lot of other cooperation. And I think from that regards, we are absolutely, Tom, ready to drive interoperability across the system, especially if you look at software-defined defense. That's a true momentum. While hardware stays heterogeneous, you put software and data algorithms on top to bring that interoperability even in a heterogeneous landscape.